What is enlightenment in your understanding?
So I argue, Chris and I argue in the book, and I've got a new paper coming out with Hussein and Daniel called Flowing into Mystical Experience, that there's a cognitive continuum. So you have a domain general heuristic that you use called fluency. I give you a text, and it's got standard white, white print and black print and a white background. I give you the exact same text, but it's now red-orange, okay? So the second one's more difficult to read. The content, the propositional content is exactly the same. But you have to manipulate this so people aren't like just directly comparing them right beside each other. But I ask you, which one's more likely to be true? You tell me the one that was black and white rather than one that was red and orange. You find the one that was black and white more beautiful. You make judgments of truth, goodness, and beauty according to how fluently you process the information. So this is called a domain general heuristic because it's not based on what you're processing, it's based on how you're processing. Now, what do we think, what do I think is going on? Because there's controversy over what is fluency, what we argue in the paper. And more people, I think, are coming around to see this is because they used to think it was ease of processing. It's just how easy things are processed. You judge them as more real. That's not right, because I can make something very easy for you to process merely by repeating it, merely by repeating it, merely by repeating it, and you're not going, oh, profound truth. You're going, this is stupid, right? So it's not ease of processing. It's much more like this. It's much more like the relevance realization that is taking a complex, messy, ill-defined world and framing it so that you have a clear, well-defined problem that you can work with, right? So that's called optimal gripping, right? So fluency is measuring the degree to which you're optimal gripping, and your brain is using that as a measure for how real the information is. It's a heuristic, which means, denote free lunch theorem, it's bound to go wrong, but it's a really good heuristic, like all your other adaptive heuristics. It's a really good rule of thumb to use. Now, Tobolensky and Reber, when you have an insight, you actually have a spike in fluency. You have a sudden increase in how fluent your processing is. And that gives you this moment of like this super salience and this flash, and you feel more deeply connected.
Yep.
Now, what if you took a bunch of insights and you strung them together so one insight is priming another, so that you're doing something like rock climbing and you have to continually non-propositionally restructure how you're looking at things and your embodiment. And so you go through one, you almost impasse, but then you get an insight and then you go to another and you go to another and you go to another. And what's happening is those insights are priming each other. You get an insight cascade and you're getting an extended aha experience. And the world feels super salient and it feels like discovery, and you feel deeply at one, and you're focused, and your egocentric narrative is dropping away because you're so religio, you're so coupled to the world. That's the flow state.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things happening in the flow state, remember when I talked about implicit learning and it can go wrong?
Yeah.
Well, what did Hogarth recommend you do to improve implicit learning? Well, he said you want to explicitly set up the context in which you're doing the implicit learning in order to help you track causal patterns rather than correlational patterns. Well, how do you do that? Well, we know how to do that. That's exactly what an experiment is. An experiment is you set up the environment so you can cleanly distinguish causal patterns from correlational patterns. What do you need in an experiment? You need clear information. Things can't be vague. You need tightly coupled. When I manipulate something, there has to be a tightly coupled response. And failure matters. You have to be able to say, hey, your hypothesis wasn't confirmed. Okay, so clear information, tightly coupled, failure matters. What are the conditions Csikszentmihalyi said needed to be the case in information processing in order for you to get into the flow state? You need clear information, it has to be tightly coupled, and failure has to matter. Do you see what flow is? It's not only an insight cascade, it's right, and when your brain's going, "Ooh, that's good, lots of insight." It's also you're cultivating intuitions that are picking up on complex patterns that are also real. And so your brain's going, do more of that. Do more of both of those. More, more, more. That's why flow is a universal across cultures, genders, socioeconomic status, language groups. People describe flow in detail with near synonymous terms. And flow is optimal for people. They regard it as some of the most powerful experiences of their life, and it's their optimal performance, right? That's because it has a high, profound functionality. And it's one of those few, maybe 2 or 3 experiences where our reduction in our egocentric narrative self is experienced positively because we're actually getting enhanced meaning in life, enhanced religio. That's why if I want to know how much meaning in life you have, one of the things I'll ask you is, how frequently do you get into the flow state? And that's quantity. Quality. Are you flowing in an environment that's largely real?
Right.
Now, what if flow is dependent on your skills, right? The demands have to just exceed your skills.
Like you need a degree of unconscious competency to be able
totally.
to. Yeah.
Now, you can get domain-specific skills that fit a particular domain. Like I'm a martial artist, right? And so
sitting at the piano and you understand your skills, it's deep in your body. You can flow.
Exactly. But you have domain general skills. You have skills of general intelligence, of orientation, of religio, of connectedness. Does that make sense? What if you were flowing in those?
Yeah, that sounds epic.
And Stephen Batchelor has argued, and I've got the great pleasure to meet Stephen, have dinner with him, that in his book on awakening, so Alone with Others, an existential approach to Buddhism, he thought that's what the Buddha had. He had this general flow state rather than a domain-specific flow state. That's not all the enlightenment is, but okay.
But yeah, but it does make perfect sense when you hear the term enlightenment and you're relating it as you are to the saliency of experience where things are flowing.
Yeah, you get this even more profound sense of at-one-ment, this sense of being deeply coupled. Yeah. You get a massive reduction of egocentrism. You get a massive presence of reality-centrism.
Yeah. Like the reduction in DMN, would you say, in the default mode network? Of
well, you have to.
Do we not want to go there?
Well, yes and no. It's more complicated because you're actually doing opponent processing. Okay. You're doing relevance realization and intelligence. But that's not enough. That's a mystical experience.
Okay. But
that's not enough for enlightenment.
Right. Okay. So we'll continue here, but I just think it's everybody can relate to this moment in their life where they had a deep felt connection of everything around them and a lack of overly focusing on self.
Exactly. Andre, the reason why we talk about the continuum is you have fluency every moment. You've had insights. The flow experience is a universal experience. And then if you see that mystical experience is just on the same machinery, then we're removing the mystique, not the challenge, but removing the mystique around the mystical experience. And this is important. 40% of the population, by most estimates, has anomalous experiences, visionary experiences, mystical experience. One of the problems of the meaning crisis is they don't have a framework to integrate those experiences.